Hey everyone, welcome to the program WRSA Radio. I am your host G1. As always, I hope you're having a good week. It's been a good one for me. Not a lot of things going on nothing really that I want to get into in the show. Just the general personal stuff that you always have going on. Anyway, I want to touch on one thing before we get into the meat of the show this week. Over the last two episodes, I have covered the goings-on in the UK, and over the course of that time, it's getting worse over there. And outside of Ireland, where we're seeing some really organized pushback, the last week or so, we're not getting much traction in the UK. It looks very much like the government efforts to arrest people and escalating those arrests to include anyone posting what's called anti-establishment post on social media. Well, I mean, hell, every post about that I do on social media is anti-establishment, so I would be under the jail. So they just keep going further and further down the road of tyranny. So far, it seems to be working, and the people are not really doing much pushback on them, and that is terrible news. It does not bode well for the UK, for freedom there, and it doesn't bode well for here, because, as I said, as goes the UK and the EU, so will go the United States. Now, let's get to this week's main story. We are back here in the U.S. because finally, Comrade Kamala is releasing what is being called her economic plan. Previously, the only thing we knew about the current vice president's plan, if she was elected, is a Cliff Notes version of Donald Trump's proposal to remove the tax on tips that service workers make. She liked it so much that Donald Trump proposed it that she decided to just copy it herself, which is just completely uninspiring and unoriginal, and that's par for the course for the current VP. Now, she is releasing this economic plan, and the main plank of this plan is what she's calling a ban on price gouging for food products. Okay, so let's take this at face value for a second before we get into it, really deeply into it. But let's assume that companies are indeed responsible for this so-called price gouging. Well, how do we define that? Who gets to decide what constitutes price gouging? Because, in business, you can have a margin on your product, and your margin may be 10-15%, and for your industry that's totally fine, or for your product line, your market, that might be totally fine to have a 15% margin, but I need a 30% margin, or I'm not really making any money. I'm just covering the basis and keeping the business afloat, and we're not making any profit, even with a 30% margin. Just because it's 30% margin, that means you're making 30%. That's all profit. No, it doesn't. That's not really what it means. It's not really what it means. So who gets to decide what constitutes gouging? Is it a 30% margin? Is it a 5% margin? Is it a 2% margin? Who makes that decision? That's going to be different for every company. Not every company is able to operate as efficiently as others, and there's debt that has to be paid. There's all kinds of expenses and things that are not really that don't really constitute overhead in the cost of producing your product. But again, let's just take this at face value. This candidate is telling you that companies that market and sell food products are so egregiously profiting from that sale that the government has to step in and put a ban in place that limits the profit margin on those sales. This candidate is telling you that the massive spike in food prices that we have all been experiencing for the last 4 years is not due to the disaster of an economic policy that originated in her administration. It's not their disastrous monetary policy. No, 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 no. The inflation on food, which is consistent with the inflation on all the other products that we're seeing out there at the same time, this food inflation is because our corporations are gouging us on the prices. And this gouging justifies a full-on, centrally planned pricing scheme controlled by the government. And that's the answer, by the way, to the question that I posed. Who makes the decision? Well, the government would make those decisions, of course. Unelected bureaucrats, the deep state, in dark government offices will decide how much a company can make from the sale of food. Those bureaucrats will totally not cave in to corporate pressure or under-the-table payments or scheming to craft those regulations to benefit, for example, leftist donors and punish companies like Goya Foods. Remember, Goya Foods were called out and kind of drugged through the coals because during the Trump administration, the owner of Goya was a Trump supporter. Do you think that the Office of Price Gouging Rulemaking will just treat a company like Goya the same as it treats a company like Ben & Jerry's? Of course not. Ben & Jerry's will be allowed to make 50% off of their sales, and Goya will be restricted to a 2% margin or no margin. That's how this always works. The left wing of the Uniparty, when they are in power, they rule. And the right wing of the Uniparty, when they're in power, they govern. And there's a difference there. The difference is that the left uses the police power of government to enforce their agenda regardless of who complains or raises a hand against it. They don't care about the insults. They don't care about the bad publicity. They do it anyway. The right will compromise and give away every aspect of their platform. They'll gut their platform in order to get along with people and appease people that hate us. They hate us and they hate our way of life. And the right-wing politicians that you send up there, the uniparty politicians, will continuously compromise. Now, this whole scheme is going to play well with the big government anti-corporate types who make up the radical left. It's all nonsense, of course, because the left have become the party of big globalist corporations. They delude their supporters with the DEI woke bullshit. That's how they buy them, because most big corporations can survive some DEI. Okay, they can afford to carry token employees who give them that diversity quota that they can roll out there and take pictures of and prominently display. Kind of get the approval of the screeching purple-haired lunatics, get them all warm and fuzzy. It's the smaller corporations that operate on really tight budgets and really tight margins that can't really afford to hire diversity for diversity's sake. Now, some of them are, and they're paying a price for it. They're hiring people who aren't qualified for positions just because they check off a certain box, and they're suffering for it. They have to hire people in reality. They have to hire people who actually know how to do a job, and they can't afford to carry extra people on the payroll just for optics. So the companies that won't compromise and won't give in to that, they have to find ways around this. The company that I currently still work for made the decision to cut the workforce and offshore it because it's seen as the only acceptable alternative to investors. The other choice they have is just to accept that they can't compete with these bigger companies. And in many cases, that means that they have to lay people off, or even some companies have to go out of business entirely. These schemes are like most big central government schemes designed and written to place the government in the position of picking winners and losers. They generally are written not by even congressional staffers or officials. Usually it's the lobbyists that craft the language of these kind of proposals, these proposed laws. So what will happen here, assuming that Harris is in the White House, is that she will propose this program. Now, this may not even be at the level of a law that they're trying to craft here, legislation. She could try to just declare this by executive order, which I think that makes it a non-starter because that will go to court immediately, and I don't really think that it has a chance of surviving court, but who knows. So it's more likely that this is a simple deflection tactic that is being rolled out. She floats this proposal, which would have to go to Congress to really get enacted as a law. That doesn't mean that it's free from legal challenge, of course, assuming it got enacted. But what it does do is it puts a potential Republican-controlled House or Senate in the position of having to give in on some measure of this. Or the media and the communist left will attack them as hating American poor people and siding with big food or whatever. You know. It's also tiresome. It's rinse and repeat because this is how it's done every single freaking time, over and over. Until we actually have representatives who work for us, who don't care what the media calls them or says about them, it will continue to happen like this. Now again, this is all, of course, assuming that Harris gets selected. I don't believe that's going to happen for a whole lot of reasons that I've touched on before, but I don't have a crystal ball, so who knows? And what I do know is that the thing that Kamala has to answer is what's stopping her right now. She's effectively the president right now because Biden has disappeared. Have you noticed that? Biden is gone. He is just out of the public light, not answering questions, not facing any media scrutiny, not being talked about at all. Where's he at? Who's actually running the country? Is Kamala running the country? Why is she waiting to enact policy? Why doesn't she just do it now? Come up with these ideas and then get Biden to go out there and act on them if you think that this can all be done by executive order. Put it in place now. Let the legal actions begin. What are you waiting for? Demonstrate that you're ruling. You're capable of governing. There's even some speculation that Biden won't even make it to the end of the year, that he'll step down and Kamala will be president for a month or two. Who knows? I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I think that's kind of a long shot. I think they're more than content to keep doing what they're doing right now, which is just keep Biden in the basement, eating ice cream or watching Matlock or whatever, and she's going to kind of be rolled out there as the de facto president. But there's always more to it than meets the eye. There's nothing stopping them from doing this, of course, except themselves. If they wanted to enact new policies that would fix the problems that they created, they would do it. But they don't have any intention of doing that. Because I believe that this entire playbook is being ran to drive out elements of the left from the Democratic wing. You need to keep in mind that the Uniparty is not a radical party. Okay, at least not how we typically define radical. They're radical, but they're radical establishment. They are radical stability. They like revolution and things like that. They like it as long as they're in control of it. They use it as a tool, just like they use everything as a tool to maintain control over a government. Just slightly to the left, just slightly to the right. All of these other things, it's all window dressing. It's all show. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of things that happen at certain levels where there is social impact, societal impact. But when you really start to get into the instability, they back off. No. It's pushed just enough to keep things together. Kamala is the left version of Trump. And what I mean by that is that She was put into place as a VP to satisfy a segment of the Democratic Party, the Democratic voters, but she was not the one that the Democrat elite wanted to be in office. There are never Kamala people out there on the left. They just are not willing to talk about that openly because, well, they likely hate Trump even more. But I still think that they're using Kamala as a way to sweep out the more radical elements of the party. They want to be able to run a more centrist, globalist, big government, pro-war, pro-Israel candidate, and they're willing to wait till the next round of elections to do that. And they know if Kamala wins, that she would be in line for 8 years of office. They really can't have that. Okay, they don't want that. They don't like the crazy purple hair lesbian cat ladies any more than we do. They tolerate them. They don't really want them for their ideas. They just want them to be a warm body to cast a vote, that a vote can be attached to at a numerical level. Those kinds of people are going to vote Democrat regardless, unless they decide not to vote at all. See, they have to get the numbers out there. They have to create the impression that they have mass. And it's for a variety of reasons, but one of the ones that I can talk about on YouTube is just to give the impression that they have the support for what they're doing. If they get any kind of mass and their candidate is a radical communist that wants to free Palestine and create all kinds of other further upset and unrest, they're going to have a problem on their hands. They'll have to pay at least some lip service to that part of the agenda. They'll have to appease those people. And that, of course, would drive anyone who is more moderate and centrist away from their party, from that wing of the Uniparty. Now, next week when the DNC convention kicks off, you're going to see this play out. Outside of the convention, you'll see this massive anti-Israeli protest that takes place, which will include riots and arrests and destruction. It's already starting to build. Inside, you're going to see the party elite rubber stamp Kamala as the candidate, the coronation. Now, Kamala has gone on record as saying that she is pro-Palestine. So if she's elected, that wing of the commie party that is pro-Palestine is going to expect that day one she will demand that Israel end the war in Gaza. Assuming that they've not just bulldozed that area completely by then and killed every adult and child there. Which again begs the question, Kamala, why have you not done that already? That's what the protesters are wanting to know. Why have you not demanded Israel stop the killing now? Now, the elite of the Uniparty don't want Israel to stop. They don't support Palestine. They support Israel. They have no intention of doing anything to stop them. So they're faced with this dilemma. Do they continue to push Kamala to get her elected and be put into position of having to try and enact an agenda that they don't really want to enact? Parts of it, at least. They just want to use that as a vehicle for votes? Or do they just pretend to encourage her and pretend to promote her and her people and push them to go even more radical? And when she loses, they can go back to their party and their people and say, hey, look, we tried, but people just don't support that really far out, really radical stuff yet. We have to keep working at a social grassroots level to get people to accept those things. And then they go back into attack mode and do everything to stop a populist agenda from Trump being enacted. Because they don't want that either. They're fine if Trump wins because he's already said that he will not stop Israel, so that's a win for the Uniparty. And they already have a plan to keep Trump bottled up and contained in his administration. So I think they are prepared for that eventuality. And this entire Kamala thing is a shaping operation on their side of the bird. Now, I could be totally wrong on that, of course. There's lots of stuff at foot there. They could just go full and just push for outright communism, consequences be damned. Just crash it all down. I don't know. I do know in my gut that we are destined for spicy times in the months following the election, regardless of who wins. I suspect it will kick off in January at the time of the inauguration, because I really do think Trump is going to win the election, the selection. And I think things will begin to go south right around the time of the inauguration. We'll see a repeat of his first inauguration where there was rioting that took place in Washington. And it'll just go from there. We'll have another summer of love in 2025. That's kind of how I'm seeing things, how I think it will play out. But who knows? Who knows? We will be along for the ride. So that is all I have time for this week. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab, Nice Crew, and the Dry Dock. Before I go, let me remind you of a training opportunity with One Shepherd that is out right now. You should get signed up for this training. Currently, right now, Florida, the new Charlie company in Florida, really needs Warrior Basic people to come and sign up for the full week. You're not going to get this level of training anywhere else in the country from anybody else. And this is probably your last opportunity to get it before the election. I think certainly before the election and before things kick off next year. You may need this training, so sign up for it. So, like I said, that's all I have time for this week. I will see you on the next episode.